Yes, Julian is 34 now, so, yeah.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Let's please stand and sing. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart.
Good morning, everyone. Great to see all of you. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spokane, where we join together to create a nourishing, liberal religious home and to champion justice, diversity, and environmental stewardship in our wider world. Or, as we say in short, to create community, find meaning, and work for justice. We also welcome all of you, as usual, those of you in the room with us, those of you who are live streaming with us. It's great to have all of you with us as well. We embrace all that you come with, whether in person or virtually. All of your uniqueness, your unique beliefs, background, lifestyle, differences, all that helps make you who you are is welcome here today. So welcome to one and all. This will be the last time you'll have to hear me announce our annual church meeting, at least for a year, because it is happening next Sunday, the 14th, following our second service at 12:30. So we do invite all members to please attend. As you've heard me say before, there will be lunch available for a donation that will go to benefit our One Parish, One Prisoner program, especially helping with the expenses of the person we'll be sponsoring when she's released. So please plan to be here for that. I seem like I'm forgetting something. Oh, we're having the Pride Parade next Saturday as well. I don't have it on in my notes, but it's here in your order of service for those who are streaming with us, who are in the area at least. That's happening, at least we'll gather at noon downtown, June 13th. And it doesn't have the exact spot where we'll be gathering. It is Auntie's bookstore, so if you'll gather near the Auntie's bookstore, we'll know where our church is supposed to line up, and we can all walk from there to wherever that spot is. That's something we don't know until the day of, as I understand it. So if you can be there to help represent, wonderful. That'd be great. Okay, yeah. That's it for now. So why don't you usually I joke you have to take a walk to say hello to folks if you're in the room with us, but it looks like you're all fairly close to each other today. You're finally getting the hang of this. That's that's good. So do take a few moments to greet one another this morning. right, let's move forward now by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our unity and our solidarity, of our openness and our inclusion, of our community and our individual uniqueness. May this small flame be our offering of warmth to those who are cold and alone, and a light to those in darkness. May it be a flame that ignites justice in our world and a beacon of hope to those in need, and may it reflect at least a spark of truth wherever truth has been lost, and cast a healthy shadow of doubt wherever it's been found.
It was a challenge for me to work on these opening words. I have not given any thought to the Ten Commandments in many years. Of course, I realize Western society's concepts of law and justice stem from those stone tablets from long ago. Fundamentally, people haven't changed, but civilization has. Those commandments were handed down from on high to an illiterate, fear-based society. Today's society is vastly different. More people are educated, well-traveled, well-read, have global connections through the internet. Folks tend to be curious and open to other cultures and attitudes. After all, the history of the world is one of migration and intermingling of people, despite what the current administration thinks. I looked at a couple of modern versions of the commandments and decided to create my own, adapting some of what I read. I encourage you to do the same. My 9 commandments, I couldn't think of 10. 1, awareness of and fidelity to the sacred, which is in all things. God is the universe. We can only catch glimpses of the great mystery. 2, practice care, compassion, and kindness. 3, continue to grow and learn throughout your life. 4, believe in and accept yourself. 5, act justly and do what is right, even if you feel alone and scared. 6, find and honor your innate creativity. 7, protect and enjoy nature and the beauty of creation. 8, take care of your body. 9, love, love, love.
Okay, please stand and sing. One more step. One more step. We will take one more step till there is peace for us, and everyone will take one more step. One more word. We will take one more word till every word is heard by everyone. We'll say one more word.
We will now kindle our candles of care for those who are most on our thoughts and minds. And again, I did not get any specific request from within our congregation, but certainly we want to kindle candles on behalf of the many in the world who are suffering from violence and injustice, including the people of Ukraine and Russia and Palestine and Israel and Iran and Darfur, South Sudan, and so many other places, as well as the many immigrants in the world, but especially here in the U.S., who are being discriminated against on our own streets. So let's share a moment of silence on behalf of others you might be thinking of, and as always, you're welcome to name them aloud at this time if you'd like. those named aloud, those embraced in our silence, and all those who are suffering in our world at this hour, we hold in our community with compassion. And we now gratefully give and receive this morning's offering, which helps sustain this community and our mission to the larger world.
And since this is Pride Month, I'm going to be doing a bunch of pieces by queer composers and artists. And yeah, so just want to say a quick thing about how a lot of composers and artists, when they're remembered in history, kind of get straight-washed, as it were, and if they were queer, it's oh, that's not important, and relationships, same-sex relationships get erased, whereas heterosexual relationships don't get erased. And if I knew that the guy who wrote Carnival Animals or the guy who wrote The Nutcracker was gay, I would have seen more of a place for myself in doing what I love to do and being open about who I am personally. So, yay. That's it.
Beautiful, Jackie. Thank you. All right, time for our story for all ages. But first, there's somebody down here. Who is this? Oh, my goodness! What a surprise! It's Bigfoot. You know Bigfoot. Most people never see Bigfoot at all, but we've had quite a few sightings of you lately, right here in our own church. Yeah, well, you weren't supposed to see me today. I was just passing through last night and I got stuck here. Oh, stuck? How did you get stuck? Well, I broke one of the rules us Bigfoots must always follow. What's that? Always put one foot in front of the other. Okay, well, that's a pretty good rule of thumb. You'll need a rule of the big toe. Yeah, a rule of a big toe in your case. But what happened what happens if you break a rule like that? Do you get arrested? Or you go to jail? You have to pay a fine? No, nothing like that, Nan. We just get stuck. You get stuck. Yeah, that's why I'm still here. Us Bigfoots are so heavy that if we stand around too long, we start to sink into the ground and we get stuck. Okay, well, I can see that being a problem, but I've got you now, so you're unstuck. Well, thanks, Nan. But it's time for me to get moving along. Well, wait a minute. Now that you're here, I would like to ask a few questions I've been wondering about you. Such as? Well, since there are obviously more than one of you, do we call you Big Feet or Bigfoots? That's a good question. Since all Bigfoots had big feet, and not all big feet had Bigfoots, you call us Bigfoots. I have no idea why that makes sense, but Bigfoots it is. Remember, I can't dilly-dally all day. Is there anything else? Well, yeah, you mentioned always putting one foot in front of the other. Do Bigfoots have any other rules? Sure we do. Rule number 1 is dream big, no matter how impossible it seems. Well, that's a really, really great rule. That's a nice dream, very optimistic. Well, we learned it from the sky. Yeah, and from the river, we learned to just go with the flow, Nan. All right, well, that's also a very positive outlook. Yes, it makes us less anxious when dealing with life's difficulties. I can see that. Any others? Well, from the mountains, we learn to sit still and keep quiet so we can rest and enjoy the beauty all around us. That's a wonderful rule. I think I might try that one this afternoon. Is that it? Well, we have one more that we learned from the forest. Always live in harmony with nature. That's one that you humans aren't so good at. And you have a lot more rules than we do. Yeah, we have a lot more rules than just 5. Well, I'm really sorry to have to admit that is true, Bigfoot. But now that you've shared your list of simple rules with us, follow your dreams, go with the flow, sit still and keep quiet, and to always live in harmony with nature, maybe we'll start doing better. What do you think? Good rules to live by. That's good. But don't forget our most important rule, always put one foot in front of the other. It's time for me to go, Nan. I need to get home so I can dream, flow, sit still, and harmonize. Later, Nan. All right, later, Bigfoot. We'll see you next time at the next Bigfoot sighting. That's the Bigfoot's 5 commandments.
As we enter our time of meditation, I invite you to find a relaxed, receptive posture. Close your eyes if you wish, and take some deeper breaths as I lead you into the silence with this poem by 11-year-old Orion Misagnia. Heart of Wonder. When I was a baby, my heart was a tiny fish swimming in a gargantuan sea of things to come. When I was a toddler, my heart was a trout in a large lake of thoughts and feelings. Now my heart is becoming a salmon, ready to go to the sea of the troubles I will have to face. When I am old, my heart will be a whale swimming in a sea of memories. When I die, God will become a whaler.
Wow, thank you. You are as extraordinary a composer as you are a musician. Yeah, thank you. So in my March 8th sermon, Pathway or Pathology, some of you may recall, I gave my translation of the Ten Commandments, after which someone said, we need to hang those on our walls. So I've decided to discuss them at more length today, including why I consider them a more accurate translation than any other. So I'll begin by talking about my unusual methodology. When I was studying the Bible in college and graduate school, students were required to take courses in hermeneutics, the study of interpretation. And this is where I learned that most people who think they know the Bible don't. They don't because they've never studied the various ways of interpreting it, along with the drawbacks and strengths of different approaches. Nor have they faced the fact that the meaning of its writings are usually vague, uncertain, and seldom historically or literally true. Most Bible believers, as some refer to themselves, adhere to what biblical scholars call the canonical approach to interpretation, which is the most erroneous and unreliable approach there is, and the most common. Canon comes from the Greek word meaning law, and when used in reference to the Bible, it refers to the entire body of literature that is considered the legitimate word of God according to church authorities. And this is so even though its contents were written and rewritten by many different authors and editors over periods of centuries. The very term Bible, the Bible, is indicative of the problem with this approach to interpreting it. It means the book, implying that it's one book with a clear and coherent theme from beginning to end. And that's why I prefer to call it the binder, which is a more accurate description of what's inside this leather-bound gold leaf collection of unrelated writings. Its first book, Genesis, for example, begins with two different creation stories in chapters 1 and 2. Scholars believe that Genesis is a compilation of various origin stories and myths from different groups of people that had merged together by the time that it was assembled. The book of Isaiah is another good but different example. It was written by at least 3 different authors over the course of an entire century. And yet we call it the book of Isaiah. These are, of course, from the Hebrew scriptures, which also have very different meanings to the Jews, their originators, than they do to the Christians who have appropriated this material as their Old Testament. Their New Testament begins not with 2, but with 4 different stories about Jesus, of Jesus' life. I once saw a funny cartoon making this point. It said, just as Jesus is about to deliver his Sermon on the Mount, he says, "Now listen up, everyone. I don't want to end up with 4 different versions of this." Additionally, only 6 of the 13 letters attributed to Apostle Paul in this collection of writings are considered authentically his. And in some instances, those that have been altered by outside hands. So to interpret this assortment of various writings as if they are all part of one book with a comprehensive message authored by one person, God, is the worst method possible because it is the most misleading approach there is. Yet, as I said, it is also the most common approach, which is why I say that most people who think they know the Bible don't. Other approaches are more valuable, far more valuable, although each provides unique insights into the meaning of these writings that the others don't. So using a variety of these approaches is the best way to understand the various writings contained within the Holy Binder. In brief, these main approaches include what's called the historical critical method, which seeks to understand the text within its original context of authorship, audience, and circumstances. It mostly seeks to understand what it meant to its original audience based upon what we know was happening in their lives when it was written. And this is akin to the sociological method, which seeks to understand these writings in light of the cultural norms, the economic conditions, and the power structures that existed when they were written. The literary method considers the elements of writing, like plot, character, and rhetorical devices used. It's hard to imagine, but some of this writing is actually artistry. To take the story of Jesus' encounter with the woman at the well, who gives him a drink of water and then runs home to tell the others of this remarkable man she met. Many simply read this as if it's reporting a real event, a historical event, but the literary approach helps us understand that it's really a familiar type scene found elsewhere in the Hebrew Scriptures. Just as gunfights, barroom brawls, and the cowboys riding off into the sunset are familiar type scenes in Western movies. In the Hebrew Scriptures, Isaac meets Rebekah at a well, who then runs home to announce the stranger whom she later marries. Jacob also meets his future wife, Rachel, at a well and runs off to tell everyone about him and marries him, as does Moses. Right? So this tells us that the account regarding Jesus isn't meant as literal history, but as a type scene used to imply something that the ancient reader would associate it with, namely that there was something very special about Jesus, akin to the greatness of Isaac, Jacob, and Moses. Although Jesus doesn't marry the woman he met in this story, that she was a Samaritan whom Jews were forbidden to associate with, may have implied that in Jesus' world, we ought to set such differences aside and come together as one people. Beautiful symbolic language, symbolic story, symbolic imagery in this account. And there are other methods that I won't go into except to mention the liberation method, which treats stories contained within the binder as if they are meant to aid in the liberation of the oppressed. And this is my usual approach, which is why my favorite book interpreting the life and teachings of Jesus is William Herzog's book entitled Parables as Subversive Speech, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And my favorite book regarding the interpretation of the Hebrew Scriptures is Introduction to the Old Testament, a Liberation Perspective by Anthony Soresco. Herzog says, for example, one clear implication of this study is that Jesus' ministry was concerned with political and economic issues. Matters of justice were not peripheral to a spiritual gospel, but were at the heart of his proclamation and practice. And Soresco writes, the Scriptures themselves seem to suggest then that we should read the Bible and its history from the bottom, that is, from the underside, through the eyes of the powerless and the poor, from the point of view of the oppressed. My goal is always to convey the meaning of these writings in ways that a modern audience might feel their meaning similarly to how they were experienced by those who first heard them ages ago. I call this the impressionistic method, and a term that I coined myself, although it borrows from all the other hermeneutical methods that I've mentioned, with the exception of the useless canonical approach. I also like the term because impression implies artistry. Impressionistic interpretations require playfulness and creativity. What other religions do you know that say, play with the Bible, get creative with it? Not too many, right? But before giving my impressionistic interpretation of the Ten Commandments, here's how they are presented in most modern translations. You shall have no other gods before me. 2, you shall not make for yourself an idol. 3, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. 4, observe the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 5, honor your mother and father. 6, you shall not murder. 7, you shall not commit adultery. 8, you shall not steal. 9, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And 10, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Although it's been removed from its context, this is the list that conservatives want to display in our schools and other public buildings. To the modern eye, we understand their essential meaning, but they still sound hollow to us, a bit arbitrary and somewhat ambiguous. You shall not murder, for example, sometimes translated as you shall not kill, obviously doesn't mean what it says at face value, or else those claiming ours is a Christian nation would be more upset by all the wars and extrajudicial killings that are going on in their name. And what does it mean to honor your father and mother? Does it simply mean you must obey them? Or to listen to what they teach us? Or to pass their ways and ideas and their rules on to our own children generation after generation, even if their old habits are no longer useful? As for making graven images, our homes, communities, museums, government buildings, and graveyards are filled with animal figures and statues of people we admire. Is this wrong? Is this a sin? And what does it mean to take the name of God in vain? Do we even know the name of God? The meaning of these simple commands seems straightforward until we start asking ourselves what it means to actually put them into practice. Yet I propose that for those for whom they were written more than a millennium ago, they had no such difficulty understanding precisely what they meant within the context of their lives, of their ancient lives. My impressionistic translation of them represents my effort to help us understand them in the same way that they did within the context of our modern lives. So here goes. 1, don't revere anything more than freedom. 2, don't take your ways and ideas too seriously. 3, don't act like you have all the answers. 4, make sure workers have the rights, resources, and the time they need to have good lives. 5, make sure you have a social security system in place to take care of your senior citizens. 6, don't destroy the lives of others. 7, don't dominate others. 8, don't take what you want from others. 9, don't demonize and dehumanize others. And 10, don't profit at the expense of others. These are a version of the commandments that make sense today because we understand precisely what these words mean in modern life. But why do I think this is what their original audience would have also taken them to mean? Because, as I said, I approach these writings by asking what they would have meant to those who experienced severe oppression and injustice. The first command, for example, have no other gods before me, when taken out of its historical, social, and its literary context, sounds to us like the words of a jealous, perhaps insecure, narcissistic, and authoritarian despot with a personality like those of the Trumps, Netanyahu's, Ayatollahs, and Putins of our modern age. But if we remember that these commands were created by various people who had escaped tyranny, slavery, oppression, and poverty, among other injustices, worshiping a punitive authoritarian God doesn't make much sense. What the command actually states is, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt and out of the land of slavery. You should have no other gods before me. So how do we know when something is worthy of our devotion and reverence? When it liberates us and others from all manner of bondage and oppression. Don't revere anything more than freedom. That's the litmus test. I take the second and third commands, don't make graven images and don't take the Lord's name in vain, to mean that we shouldn't care so much about our ideas, especially our religious beliefs, that we will attack and punish those who see things differently. How many people have been exploited and abused because the dominant culture looked down on them because of their backward ideas, their heretical beliefs? How many have been persecuted because they were called godless, heathens, infidels, and the like? So, as I frame these commands, don't take your ways and ideas too seriously, and don't act like you have all the answers. The fourth command, observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, is the clearest example of what I'm talking about. Only a group of former slaves who never had a day off could establish the first labor law in human history. The command was so liberal, in fact, that it even included animal rights, perhaps because its creators knew what it was like to be treated as animals themselves. On it you shall do no work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. Everybody gets a day off. Or as my command says, or puts it, make sure your workers have the rights, resources, and time they need to have good lives. This, incidentally, is why my first command doesn't say, don't revere anything more than your freedom, just freedom. Because our devotion to freedom must be to the principle of freedom, to freedom for all. Freedom from oppression, inequality, and injustice, and freedom to participate in all the benefits of human society. The abbreviated fifth command, the version that they want to hang in on the classroom walls, simply says, honor your father and mother. But the rest of the command reads, so that you may live long in the land your God is giving you. The result of honoring our elders is that when we become elderly, we too will be cared for. It's systemic. It's about putting a process in place to care for those who can no longer work. An idea that once again was established by former slaves who would have had to watch the suffering, perhaps the executions of those who became too old or too infirmed to work. So make sure you have a social security system in place to take care of your senior citizens. And since the meaning of the simple phrase, "thou shalt not kill," is obviously too complicated for many followers of the Hebrew Scriptures and the Bible to grasp, I've tried to make its original meaning more pointed. Don't destroy the lives of others. Whether it's by killing them, bombing their homes, their cities, their schools, their hospitals, their roads, their bridges, or by ruining their reputations on social media or in any other way. Don't kill people. Don't attack them. Don't Don't ad hominem attack them either. Just don't. Don't destroy the lives of other people. I hope that's simpler to understand, but probably not. The context of the seventh command, you shall not commit adultery, is complicated. In short, condemnation for sex crimes in ancient society was usually directed at those who had been the victims of sexual exploitation. Even today, there are some societies that justify what they call the honor killings of girls and women who have been raped. This is barbaric. To point the problem to adultery, at least to what it meant in ancient times, redirects the matter to everyone involved, including those in powerful positions that exploit and abuse others. This is why I translate this command more broadly as don't dominate others. Not sexually, not for any other reason. Because dominating violates the first principle, taking away the freedom of other people. Thou shalt not steal remains probably the most understandable command in today's parlance, but I still prefer to say, don't take what you want from others. For stealing merely implies the taking of objects, leaving out those who are victimized by such behavior. By referencing others, my version puts a human face on such crimes, something I'm confident that the Decalogue's framers would appreciate as the people who knew what it was like to be so objectified that they were treated themselves as possessions, yet had no true possessions of their own. And I don't know how big a problem false witness was during the time of the Decalogue, when it was drafted anyway, but it must have been bad enough to have been included in a list of 10 commandments. As I see it, the problem is just as bad today, or worse, given the advent of social media and the so-called cancel culture that it has created. Excuse me. So maybe I should just rephrase this one to say, don't cancel anybody. But more broadly speaking, don't demonize and dehumanize others. Don't demonize and dehumanize others. It best gets at the original meaning in a way that we can relate to today. As one who has been condemned as racist, homo and transphobic, ableist, and classist by my own religion for writing a book criticizing it for such behavior, I know how damaging bearing false witness can be. So don't demonize and dehumanize others. Finally, I translate the 10th commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife or anything that belongs to your neighbor, to simply say, don't profit at the expense of others. As with stealing, this better gets at the human impacts of such behavior. For it's one thing to want what others have, it's another thing to take what we want from them. For those living under oppressive circumstances with no right to anything of their own, what little they did have, a blanket, a tunic, a memento from happier times, could be taken at any time by anyone, including from their own, equally as desperate neighbors. So don't profit at the expense of others. Today there are countless ways to profit at the expense of others, sometimes without even realizing it. Our economy is so widespread, after all, that we're unable to see its full impacts, nor fully understand how achieving our interest may negatively impact the interest of others. It's impossible to know, but we must do our best to pay attention to not profit at the expense of others. So in closing, it's easy for us to think of the Ten Commandments as a worn-out relic of religious authority, as a set of arbitrary rules etched in stone by some jealous God, a list that many authoritarians today wish to impose upon our entire society. No wonder they mean so little to us freedom lovers. But look at them now. Don't revere anything more than freedom. Make sure workers have the rights and the time they need to have good lives. Don't demonize and dehumanize others. Don't profit at the expense of others. These aren't the words of oppression. These are the words of people who knew oppression firsthand and refused to let it have the last word. The irony is that the loudest voices calling for these commandments to be posted in classrooms and other public buildings would be the first to oppose them if they understood what they actually say. Social Security, animal rights, the dignity of foreigners, that's the Decalogue. Not a religious decoration, but as a radical manifesto written by former slaves who dared to imagine a different kind of world. Now, as much as I believe in the separation of church and state, I'd consent to hanging them just about anywhere, if doing so means that we have to finally start following them. Thank you.
Okay, please stand and let's sing. How could anyone?
Our benediction this morning is by Amy Zucker Morgenstern. As we leave this hallowed place, may our feet remember its feel, so that wherever we walk, we know ourselves to be on hallowed ground. May we know that we are kin with every soul, every star, every stone, and leaf of grass. And may our words be gentle and our touch be kind. Amen. Blessed be. Salam aleikum and shalom.